Good evening and thank you for joining me on You and Your Money. I'm Bryan and this evening our program focuses on retirement and financial planning. I'd like to share with spouses a recent story which I know that I've dealt with previously. This is my story. Unfortunately, over the years that I've been in the industry, I've had a lot of deaths where one spouse has died. And invariably, that one spouse in numerous occasions is the male who's passed on, leaving surviving spouse, the wife. In our religion, the concept is when someone dies, people come home, they spend 7 days at home, what they call Shiva, mourning for that lost person. Families visit, people bring food, so they keep you out of the day-to-day routine of life. And in my visiting those homes, I've often put my arm around the individual who has lost a loved one and said, "You'll be okay." 3 to 4 weeks later, when I meet with that person who's now come to finalize what's happening with the estate, they've said to me the most important thing that anyone said to them in that entire time of mourning, where hundreds of people may have been to visit, was my statement that you'll be all right. And the reason for that is that I've ascertained over the years that the surviving spouse, usually the wife, goes through 2 emotions. The first is grief, which is understandable. And the second is guilt, which you may say to yourself now, why guilt? I'll tell you why guilt. Because at the time of grieving, many spouses are thinking about money. Who's going to pay the bond? How my children going to get educated? How are we going to live going on? I know times have changed where in the years gone by, my father wanted my sister to marry a doctor, an accountant or a lawyer, and today parents want their children to be doctors, accountants and lawyers. But I've realized in this that so many people do not understand the financial circumstances of the family. The husband says, everything's okay, don't worry. And I've had numerous occasions where it was a lot to worry about. And I've never said to a mourner, to the wife, I've never said to them, you don't need to worry, if I was concerned that there may have been a worry. And the question I ask is why? Why isn't discussions being held between husbands and wives and the family to understand what happens in the event of premature death and even disability? What happens? How does the bond get paid, if there is bond? Other debt? How do educational costs get paid? And then lastly, how do you live? Because bear in mind, if one of the partners is the chief breadwinner, and even though the wife may have a career of her own, she still relies on a lot of the earnings that come in from her late husband. So my advice to people is very simply, sit down with your families, sit down with your husbands. Don't just believe when your husband says everything's going to be all right. I met with the lady in Cape Town on Friday. Her husband told her everything's going to be all right. He was a financial man himself. She believed in what he was doing. She left him with debt of 6 million rand and 4 million rands of insurance. There was a lot of things she had to do, had to go out and find a job and all those things. So, Daryl, why is it to you now? Do you also find the same thing? Spouses don't seem to talk to each other about their financial affairs.
No, it's a big problem, Bryan, and I think that's where a financial planner or a wealth advisor is important to facilitate the conversation. You know, if the husband and wife are not talking to one another, I think it's what I do with my clients. I say to my client, if I'm dealing, let's say, with a husband, I say, I'd like to meet your wife before you pass away. I don't want to meet your wife for the first time if something should happen to you. You know, I'm meeting a stranger, it's not the right way to do it. And in any case, it's important to incorporate the wife to begin with and the children thereafter, depending on what ages they are. So I think the advisor can play a very instrumental and important role in facilitating the conversation.
I've got another situation where mother died. The father died, left some money to the mother. Not enough to survive. She's 85 years old, not enough to survive. There are 3 children. I've said to them, before you even think of investing 1 million rand, the mother needs 37,000 rand. She's in a retirement home. 1 million rand is going to give us 6,000 or 7,000. Where's the balance going to come in from? The one kid says it's coming from me, and the other two aren't helping to support. I said, and tell me about your circumstances. Tells me he's got 6 million rands worth of life insurance. Sounds a lot. He needs 150,000 rand with the support he gives his mother. And I said, well, what happens if something happens to you? What happens to your mother? They now had last week, I'm waiting to hear this week, they had a family conference, how that's going to happen. So these are real concerns. Daryl, I forgot to introduce you. Daryl Bennett, Sasfin Wealth Manager. So, welcome to you, Daryl. Nice to have you on the show. Daryl's always been a regular customer. Okay, so let's just talk about relationship with money. It's a favorite topic. You love it. Well, you love the psychology, the relationship with money.
It's not
Share
so
with
much
us that concept.
Yeah, it's not that I love it. It's just that I've been doing financial coaching and I'm working with a coach, and he said something that was quite profound.
How long have you been doing coaching for?
For about 6-7 months.
And how long have you been in the industry?
22 years.
Okay.
So what he said was very, very profound. He said the longest relationship we will have as a human being is with money. And I said to him, why is that? He said, because when you're in the womb, you're feeling the vibrations of your mother, and that's where it begins, and it ends after you pass away, because your estate needs to be wound up. So after you pass away, the relationship with money continues. And everybody has got their own money script. Everybody has got their own history and their pain associated with money. And it's important to understand what your relationship to money is. Not in a highly emotional way, but when you are sitting with a financial planner who's happy to listen to your story and listen to be able to help you and put strategies and solutions in place so that you can come to terms with your fear or whatever your pain is around money.
Because it's very important. I mean, education is so very important. I mean, we as financial advisors play 3 roles. We advise. Some take our advice, some take some of our advice, some take none of our advice. Then you've got those clients who say, please, I want you to be my financial nanny. I don't understand all this jargon. It was easy years ago. Now it's incumbent on us in terms of phase that we make sure our clients understand what they're doing, the actions they're taking. And then the third thing is, and we're probably reaching that third stage at the moment, we've become financial psychologists, where we're saying to people, the oil price has spiked. The markets are coming down. Don't panic. We've been there before. As a matter of fact, we were there in April when Trump announced Liberation Day. You made an interesting comment when we were sitting waiting to come on the show, that in 2008, the property crisis in America was not what caused the markets to crash. It was the spike in the oil price.
Correct.
Just comment on that.
Well, so what happened in 2008 was that the oil price spiked and it eventually got to $140 a barrel. So the domino effect from that, Bryan, was that people were putting more gasoline in their tanks, so therefore weren't paying their mortgage bonds. So then there was defaults on the properties. And that's what uncovered the property, the housing crisis that was with those junk bonds. But it was the spike in the oil price that actually triggered the market to come off.
So what we are all saying to our clients, if you're in the market, and you're in the market for long term, because you shouldn't be in the market if you don't have a long-term strategy, just ride it through. I mean, there's some quality companies you're invested in. There may be some impact because we've got a concern about AI. And when is AI cost 650, and I repeat, $650 billion this year? But the companies that are spending it have the money. It's not as if they have to go out and look for shareholder support. They've got the money and they're doing it. But the market's saying, great results, but when are we going to start seeing some profits from all the spend? So those are things that we need to think about going forward. And would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think it's also important to have an investment specialist. You know, as a financial planner, I work with investment specialists. I'm sure you do as well. And when these specialists are constructing portfolios, not only in equities, and equities should be the bulk of the portfolio, then it's once again, it's like you said earlier, husbands aren't talking to wives. The clients need to speak to the investment specialist to understand why they're holding that counter, why they're buying that particular company. What does that company do? How long has that company been around? Why do their analysts, internal, external analysts, research like those particular companies? And then you construct that portfolio and you stick with it. You stick with that for a long period of time. If the investment specialist decides to buy or to sell, he's buying or selling for a reason. when you've got these external geopolitical, and at the moment it's heightened geopolitical environment. When I say it's heightened, it's because there's a war going on in the Middle East. So it's really heightened. Is that these are still rock solid companies. These companies are still making profits. They've still got strong management. They've still got competitive advantage.
They've still got cash.
They've still got cash, and they're still producing and manufacturing. So the market, which is driven by fear and greed, will hit a wobble. There will be heightened volatility, but it's not the time to panic, or it's not the time to sell just because the prices are going down.
Well, I have a very different view. You know, my view is when markets are falling, there's no better time to be buying, even if you're thinking, because no one rings a bell. And by the way, you know, the concept of the bell ringing came from the Lloyd's coffee shop, going back into the 17th century, when people went out to sea and the people got together and collected money to help the unfortunate few ships may have sunk. That's the whole concept of the Lloyd's insurance business. That's where the bell rings. No one rings the bell at the top or the bottom. That's but right. Very simply, when markets are down, that's not the time to panic. And if you've got a long-term strategy, I'm not saying go all full tilt into the market, but start phasing money in, because when you get markets coming down in a triangle, you're buying and maybe buying at lower prices, but when markets get back to the level, when you've been buying and markets have been falling, every time the market gets back to its previous level, you've made money. Whereas if you're buying on the other way, when there's triangles like that, every time you're actually buying, you may be losing money. So a great time to be investing. But Daryl, let's just understand, I had a terrible February because people contacting me about tax and retirement annuities, and they had to get it in on a certain date. So we're now at the start of the tax year. Let's talk about, we've had some good information come out of the budget. Maybe you want to just make some comments of those changes. And is this not a great time now in March? If you're going to be buying retirement annuities or you're going to be buying tax-free savings, you want to do it on a monthly basis. Do it now over the next 12 months. So come next February, you're in.
100%. So it was actually a very good budget. They actually gave back.
Daryl, let's come back to that. When you I'll remind you, and you said it was a very good budget. We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned.